and thanks to all our presenters. We're going to jump straight into questions, and I'm going to hand to Heather. We don't have as much time as we'd like, but I thought it, rather than cutting short the presentation times, we wanted to hear them in their entirety. And just to note that we will also be providing answers to the questions lodged in the chat function out of session through that Feral Pig website page. Heather, I'm going to hand to you to field a couple of questions with the time we've got left. Thank you.
Thanks, Ricky. I could also note there, if anyone else has got any questions that they haven't already submitted, feel free to add them into the chat function and we'll go back and get those answers for you and get back to you. So I'll start in order here. We've got a question here from Sam Armstrong to Matt Courts about the cost of the thermal aspect of shooting compared to traditional aerial shooting, Matt.
Yep, thanks, Heather. So basically, I encourage you to speak to a provider such as HeliSurveys to get a quote, because it does vary from location to location and what you're trying to achieve. Compared to traditional shooting, it is much more expensive than your normal traditional shooting. For us here in Kangaroo, we're doing eradication, and the costs are much different to what you'd compare it to on the mainland when you're doing a management program. We expect to pay a lot per pig we kill, and that price will grow exponentially as we move towards eradication. But I still believe it's a fantastic tool regardless of the cost, and it's just where you're applying it. And for eradications, it fits really perfectly with that high level detectability.
Thanks, Matt. The next one is from Debbie Saunders. What are the specs of the thermal camera used? Is this available more generally, or is it classed as military grade and requires special permissions?
Again, you'll have to speak to HeliSurveys I provide, but I can't tell you the specs on the top of my head. From what I do know, it's basically the highest specs that a civilian can get. It's not a military grade camera, it is civilian. I do believe you'd have to speak to them. I think there are some permits required for its use perhaps, or importing it into the country from the US, because it is from the US. But it's not a military grade camera. Okay,
and another question for you from Adam Bowen. What was the ambient temperature when shooting?
So it's a bit of a complex one, but just to summarize, for thermal to work, it's not necessarily, it's not the temperature, it's the temperature difference from the target to the environment you're working in. So when we were flying, it was cooler. So, you know, anything 1-2 degrees to 5, 10, 15. It was more what would happen was, we'd start at dawn, and when it got to 9 AM, that sun was really coming up, it would heat the environment around us, and you'd have yakas or trees that would get really warm from that sun, and you wouldn't be able to identify feral pigs or kangaroos from the environment around it. So it's that temperature difference. And when you're in the warmer months of the year, you're not going to have that temperature difference from cool to the hot feral pigs, if that makes sense.
Thank you. It does to me. Another question I've got here from Ross Cutler, what we might do with that one around checking how whether you're eradicating pigs. It might be something that we can provide as a response later on. It might be a bit more detail than what you can present now verbally, I'm thinking, Matt.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk with Ross out of session.
Okay, or just provide us with a response and we can put it onto the website.
Yep.
Okay, so from Peter Adams, I'm just going to read this one. So typically when you have high pig density, cost per pig is quite low. So I think he's answering someone else's question. But when your pig density drops, the cost goes up. At low densities, it wouldn't be hard to spend more than $100 per pig shot. So thanks, Pete, for that. So another one from Debbie. Where is it? I'm scrolling up and I'm losing my, just mindful of time. Oh, hang on. Sorry, having issues with trying to scroll up and down here. So one from Diane Phillips to Sky and or Haley. Did you compare PCR results on oral swabs versus tonsillar tissue, i.e. can oral swabs yield PCR positive, or do you really need to test the tonsils? And this is for JEV.
Hi, yeah, I'll answer that one. I was just having a little text conversation with Sky to try and clarify that question. So my understanding is that NARCs were getting tonsil tissue but not swabs, but then we were getting from different sources, we were getting swabs but not tonsils. So we have had PCR positives for tonsils. We've also had PCR positive detections using swabs, but we have not been able to compare with the tonsils and the swabs are both positive at the same time. But Sky was just saying on the latest survey that just happened last week, they got both. So we'll be able to compare if there are any positives from that. So yeah, in conclusion, comparison not possible, but their positives have resulted from both methods.
Okay, and I think with time, Ricky, that's probably all we've got. A lot of the feedback in here is commentary, which we can pull out and make sure that you can get copies of that later on as well. So I'll hand it back to you. Thank you, Ricky, and thank you everybody for your for joining in today.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, I agree. Look, we've got everything noted down in terms of the questions that have been put there into the chat. We will follow up and provide responses via the webpage. Just a reminder that there is that 6-question survey. I encourage everyone to fill out, please. But I just wanted to reiterate the value of today's session and thank all of our presenters, and particularly all of our audience and those I mentioned from the different committees as part of our team. That is basically it. Again, thanks for your time and participation today, and we look forward to our next discussions. Please keep an eye on the Feral Pigs webpage, and as always, our contact details are there. Feel free to reach out to us at any time. Thanks again, and I'd like to call the webinar to a close.